Hey guys, tonight we wake up in a house made of sticks, mud, and whatever else could be packed together to keep the wind out barely. There are no windows, just slits that let in the cold. There's no fireplace, no soft bed, and no plush blanket wrapped around you. The walls sweat with damp. Your breath fogs the air like steam from a ghost's mouth. And the straw mattress you slept on. It crunched every time you moved, probably from the bugs inside. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes not to morning light, but to a gray gloom that seeps through the cracks in your wall. The sun might be up, but you wouldn't know it's winter, and light is more rumor than reality. You pull your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders, shifting on your lumpy straw sack. You're already awake, but you don't move yet. Because moving means exposing a new part of your body to the cold. The cold isn't just a background discomfort, it's the enemy. It creeps through every gap, sinks into your bones, and hangs in the air like a heavy curtain. Your breath comes out in quick, foggy puffs, and for a second you wonder if that pain in your fingers is frostbite or just another night sleeping with your hands uncovered. You wiggle your toes. They respond. Barely. Good. That's a small victory. Your house is silent except for the occasional rustle from someone else shifting under their layers. You're not alone, far from it, but everyone is doing the same. Morning calculation. Is it worse to stay still and freeze or to move and suffer? The walls around you are brown, with old mud, layered over with newer mud, patched in places where last season's storms broke through. There's no paint, no decoration, just utility. Even the smell is utilitarian earth ash, and the sharp hint of unwashed human. The ceiling is low, thatched with reeds which sway ever so slightly in the wind. A piece of it drops dust onto your forehead. You brush it away with the back of your hands and sit up. The rush of cold against your back nearly takes your breath away. There's no such thing as morning routine. You don't stretch. You don't shower. You don't scroll your phone for 15 minutes in a cozy duvet. You roll your cloak tighter around you and brace yourself to stand. Even standing is an ordeal. The straw sack you slept on gave you the world's lumpiest mattress and the frozen dirt floor beneath that, let's just say, it doesn't have much give. Your joints ache. You're pretty sure your shoulder is out of alignment, but there's no chiropractor for peasant backs. As you rise, you glance around the room. There are others here, swaddled in layers like mummified potatoes. Most haven't stirred. Some peek at you through sleepy red-rimmed eyes. You all have the same thought: who's going to check the fire? You volunteered yesterday, so now it's someone else's turn. Hopefully. But just in case your gaze shifts to the center of the room, to the fire pit, and your heart sinks. It's dark, no glow, just ash. The fire has gone out. A quiet groan passes through the room. The ash was banked last night, carefully covered, to trap the embers till morning. But the cold must have sunk too deep, crept too fast. Now it's dead. Someone whispers a curse, another one pulls their blanket tighter. You shuffle toward it, hoping, praying maybe there's still something under the ash, just a coal of flicker. You dig gently, fingers freezing, ash caking under your nails. Nothing, just powder and black flakes. Your body is stiff. Your hands tremble, but you know what this means. You'll have to relight the fire, and that means flint. You reach for the flint and steel in the corner, nearly dropping them with your numb fingers. You hunch over, crouched by the pit, and begin to strike. Spark after spark leaps into the air, disappearing before it can touch the kindling. Your nose stings. Your eyes water. Not from smoke, there isn't any yet, but from frustration, from the sheer weight of cold that sits on your shoulders like a frozen boulder. Finally, a glow, a tiny red eye in the bark shaving. You cup it with your hands, coaxing it to grow. You blow gently. It flares. Yes, yes. The others shuffle closer. Not too close, you're still one sneeze away from snuffing it out, but close enough to hope. Someone adds more bark. Another hands you a stick. In a minute, there's a flickering flame. It's weak, but it's enough. The group huddles near like moths with tired feet. The fire isn't warm yet, but it's light. And light means the day has started. You've survived another night. Barely. Historians still argue whether peasant homes in the early Middle Ages were truly as bleak as this. Some suggest communities may have shared larger hearth houses or developed better heating tricks we've forgotten. But for many, the cold was relentless. And the fact that anyone survived it, especially children, is astonishing. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some people slept with carved turnips under their blankets. Not for comfort, these were filled with embers and used like little night heaters. You know, before hot water bottles were a thing. That's commitment. Now the fire crackles a little louder. You rub your hands together, hoping for blood flow. The others begin to rise slowly, cautiously, as if they too fear the room might snap them in half with a chill. And just like that, another medieval day begins. You shuffle away from the fire, reluctantly peeling yourself from the thin band of warmth it's starting to radiate. Because now, it's time to get moving to face the rest of the house. And house is a generous term. It's more like a glorified mud shell, one stiff wind away from becoming a very earthy blanket. Your foot steps into a puddle. Indoors. Of course, the thatched roof drips whenever it rains or snows, which is often. And not just a polite drip from a quiet leak in the corner. No, this place leaks like it's trying to teach you a lesson. The cold seeps through the holes, and now your sock wool if you're lucky, but more likely just a rag wrapped around your foot is wet. That will haunt you for hours. The walls don't offer much help either. Their cob, a charming medieval blend of mud straw and cow dung. Yes, dung. Don't make that face. It's surprisingly effective at holding things together. Until, of course, it cracks. And in the winter, it always cracks. You run your fingers along one of the deeper fissures near the doorway. Wind whistles through it, like the house is trying to sing you a haunting little song. You stick a wad of moss into the crack, then pat it with a bit of cloth to muffle the draft. You've done this 100 times, So has everyone else in the family. Keeping the house patched is never-ending more patchwork than permanent structure. The roof above you creaks ominously. A rat, probably. If it's just a rat, you're lucky. Sometimes when it's been a particularly active night up there, a fat one tumbles through and lands directly in whatever pot is on the fire. You've fished out worse. Everyone pretends not to see when it happens. And your home-cooked soup. It always has a little extra protein. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant homes truly had such poor roofing, or if surviving structures are just the worst examples. But given how few resources most families had, your leaking thatch ceiling is probably pretty standard. You step outside for a moment, pulling your cloak tighter. The door is just a wooden plank on a leather hinge, more symbolic than functional. It scrapes against the packed dirt floor. You get a blast of wind to the face so cold, it feels like it's biting your skin off. There's no porch, no awning, just mud. Frozen mud if you're lucky. Sticky shoe-stealing mud if you're not. The entire world around you is gray and brown. Trees stripped bare fields, lying still under a sheet of frost. A chicken pecks at something frozen solid. You don't want to know what. Back inside, you try to warm up again. But there's no true warmth in this house. The fire helps, but only if you're sitting right next to it. Step 2 paces away, and it's like stepping back outside. The air clings to your skin, heavy with damp. The walls sweat and steam when the fire gets hot enough, but that's rare. And the smell. Oh boy. Imagine wet wool, stale smoke, old stew, and that special blend of unwashed humanity. Now add animal funk and a dash of mildew for flair. That's your daily bouquet. You're not grossed out anymore, though. You've adapted. You barely notice. But if someone from the 21st century time-traveled in right now, they'd pass out within seconds. Or demand a shower. Good luck finding one. There's not much furniture. A wooden stool, a low table, a bench along the wall. You've eaten meals, mended clothes, and bandaged wounds on the same slab of wood. Everything must serve multiple purposes, or it doesn't belong here. Oh, and you don't own the house. You rent it from the Lord, who owns the land. Which means if you ever complain about the state of things, he'll just laugh and remind you that it's better than a pile of leaves. And honestly, he's not wrong. Here's a fun fact. Archaeologists have found impressions of human knees worn into medieval dirt floors. From decades of kneeling by hearths churning butter, praying or just existing in cold submission to the ground beneath. So yes, the very earth under your feet holds the shape of survival. Someone tries to open the window shutter, just a wooden plank tied on with string. The moment it swings out, a gust of wind barges in like an angry ghost. Everyone groans. The plank slams shut again. Light's a luxury and warmth trumps sunshine. You walk over to your bed, if you can call it that. It's tucked in the corner, pressed against 2 cracked walls, made of straw, wrapped in a burlap sheet, damp in places. You poke the edge, and your finger comes away cold and smelling faintly of mouse urine. Still it's yours. Your own little patch of the world. Sometimes, When the fire is strong and the wind dies down and your fingers aren't numb, you sit here and feel something close to peace. But not now. Now your sibling stomps in from outside covered in mud, clutching an armful of frozen sticks. You both know the roof will leak worse tonight. You glance up at the sagging thatch and sigh, because there's no place like home. And yet somehow, this pile of sticks and dung is your sanctuary. You return to your corner where your straw bed lies like a forgotten scarecrow costume. Calling it a bed is frankly a stretch. It's a glorified pile of discarded harvest scraps, half compressed from your body weight, and the occasional uninvited rodent. But that's where you sleep, or at least try to. You lie down slowly, gingerly, like you're trying not to wake the lice, because they're in there. You know it. You can feel them even if you try not to think about it. Skittering legs, tiny bites, a kind of midnight itch. You've stopped scratching, because it never ends. Your cloak is still wrapped tight around you, your feet tucked into the crook of your knees, and your arms folded into your chest like you're trying to become your own blanket. The straw pokes through the cloth sharp and unyielding. Some pieces are broken into splinters. One finds the tender spot behind your knee and stays there just out of reach. You shift, and suddenly you're face to face with the wall, cold, damp, and smelling faintly of spoiled milk. You back up again. You don't sleep so much as retreat. Sleep is a luxury. What you get is more like a freeze-induced trance. Your mind folds in on itself, trying to hide in some imagined warmth. And through it all, the cold remains not loud, not sharp, but persistent, like a wet dog that refuses to leave. People like to say the body adjusts, and it does to a point. But no one gets used to cold that freezes your breath in your nostrils. You learn to endure it. You learn how to go still, how to tuck your hands between your thighs, how to move as little as possible, because motion means exposure. And exposure means pain. Historians still argue whether people truly spent entire winters without proper bedding, or if more insulating materials, animal skins, heavy cloth were common in poorer homes. But based on the archaeological record and surviving texts, your nightly battle with the cold is all too believable. You wiggle your toes just to check. They're still there, but one feels slower than the others. That's not great. You don't mention it. There's no doctor coming. No warm bath to dip them into. If frostbite takes a toe, well, that's life. The cold wins sometimes. You pull your cloak tighter around your ears. Not because it helps much, but because it gives you something to do. Your breath fogs the inside of the fabric. The warmth from your own lungs is oddly comforting. You exhale slowly, letting the vapor bounce back and mist your cheeks. And still you don't sleep. The wind rattles the walls. A gust pushes through a crack above your bed and whistles straight across your face. You flinch and burrow deeper, nose to knees, eyes shut tight. You pretend you're somewhere else, maybe under a feather duvet, maybe in a castle, maybe in a place with doors that don't breathe. And then someone coughs, not a gentle little tickle, a deep chest-rattling, bone-shaking hack that sounds like it's trying to evict a lung. Everyone hears it. No one says anything. Illness is part of life. The cold brings it in, holds it close. And once it's here, It spreads like gossip at a market stall. You hope it's just a dry throat. You breathe carefully. You've learned to. No deep inhales, not through your mouth. The air is too sharp, it hits your lungs like a slap from the inside. So you sip the air through your nose slow and measured, as if drinking soup you're not sure is hot. Some nights the cold feels almost sentient, like it's watching you, waiting. If it had fingers, it'd be stroking your face right now. Instead, it settles into your joints, curls up beside your ribs, and hums softly against your spine. Here's a weird tidbit. Some medieval folks believed that sleeping too close to the ground could suck your soul out through your feet. Honestly, on nights like this, that might not sound so bad. You hear someone shifting nearby. It's your mother, probably. She's reaching over to tuck more ash around the fire pit, trying to hold on to the last embers. You don't open your eyes. You don't move. Movement is betrayal. Movement lets the cold in. She settles again. And for a moment, you all fall back into that shallow, near sleep state. You don't dream. You float. A gray world behind closed lids, waiting for morning. Except there's no such thing as morning warmth. When light finally seeps in, it brings no comfort. Only the reminder that you've survived another night, and you get to do it all again in about 16 hours. You stretch barely and feel your hip pop. The straw has rearranged itself into a spine-punishing ridge under your back. You feel a tickle on your calf. You scratch casually without looking. Probably just a straw. Probably. Someone starts to stir more actively. There's the rustle of cloth, the soft scrape of a pot being pushed across the hearthstones. A cough, a muttered prayer, the low rhythmic breath of someone still asleep, likely the baby. And then from the roof, a thump, a sharp, skittering thud. A rat, maybe. Maybe not. But it's inside now, and you're too tired to care. You sit up slowly. Your joints argue, your knees click, and your back creaks like an old door. You wrap your cloak around you, plant your feet on the cold, damp floor, and rise. Another day in the cold, another night on the straw. You've made it through again, for now. The smoke hits your eyes before you even open them fully. It stings in a way that's sharp and familiar, like an unwanted alarm clock made of ash. The fire is lit barely, but because there's no chimney, the smoke hangs in the air like an uninvited fog, curling from the hearth and clinging to the rafters. You blink through it, eyes watering, mouth dry, and just accept it. Because this is life. The hearth is the center of everything. Not just the home, but your survival. It's where the food cooks, where the heat gathers, where the light flickers. Without it, you wouldn't last the night. And despite the smoke, the coughing, the smell, it's the best thing in the house. Right now, it's just glowing embers. Not enough to cook, but enough to radiate a bit of warmth. You move toward it, one hand outstretched like a plant chasing sunlight. The warmth is stingy. It kisses your knuckles, barely reaches your face. Still, you crouch close, fingers spread, taking whatever it gives. There's a pot hanging over the coals, blackened from years of soot. You can't see what's inside, but you'd bet it's yesterday's stew or what's left of it. The smell is vaguely edible. Maybe onions, maybe turnips, maybe hope. You reach for a stick, poke the embers. A few sparks leap up, protesting the disturbance. More smoke billows upward, and you cough without meaning to. It burns your throat. But this is a good sign. Smoke means heat. Heat means safety, sort of. Someone opens the door just a crack and the draft whooshes in like an icy slap. The smoke gets pulled sideways, slicing through the room. For a brief moment, it's like the house exhales. Then the door swings shut, and the smoke settles again right back where it was. In your eyes, in your lungs. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had dedicated chimneys. Some evidence suggests they didn't become common until later centuries. Instead, homes vented smoke through holes in the roof or not at all. You live in the not at all variety. The ceiling above the fire is black, thick with soot. You glance up and see where the smoke curls through a small gap in the thatch. Not enough to let in real light. Just enough to let out a bit of the dark. You sit by the fire pit, legs folded, hands stretched. The floor here is warm. Not soft, never soft, but it radiates comfort like a giant breath of the house itself. Your siblings shuffle closer one by one, forming a circle around the coals. No one talks. There's nothing to say. The fire speaks for everyone. And let's be clear, it's not a beautiful fireplace with bricks and a roaring blaze. It's a depression in the dirt, ringed by stones. The ash has built up in ridges like miniature mountains. You recognize them. Some of those shapes have been here longer than you've been alive. Your mother drops a handful of dried herbs into the fire. Not for flavor, though, the stew could use it, but for the fleas. The smoke chases them, or at least that's the theory. The sharp scent fills the air, something bitter and green, and for a moment it smells like the world outside springtime. Quirky fact of the day, some folks in the Middle Ages believed burning juniper branches would purify a sick room, or drive out evil spirits, or fleas. Honestly, it's a 3-for-1 deal. And in this house, you'll take all the help you can get. You pull your tunic over your mouth and breathe through the cloth. It doesn't help much. The smoke always finds you. It gets in your clothes, your hair, your skin. You smell like the hearth, always. There's no escape. But this smoke is part of your life. It's in your stories, your food, your prayers. You've seen it rise in spirals during weddings. You've watched it drift up through roof beams during winter feasts. You've wept through it when someone died and the fire still had to be tended. The fire is the constant. Your home might fall apart. The animals might run off. The cold might eat away at your toes. But as long as there's a glowing core in that pit, you're alive. You reach for a stick and start to poke the coals again, coaxing them into life. More sparks. A tiny flame. You feed it carefully, watching it grow, like a child learning to walk. It flutters, wavers, then catches. The room seems to brighten just a shade, not from light but from mood. One of your siblings leans closer, palms out. The baby starts to fuss. The cold has pulled back a little. Not much, but enough to breathe. There's no chimney, no flue, no metal grate. Just you, the fire, and the smoke curling upward, like a prayer you didn't mean to say out loud. The day fades fast in winter. The light slips sideways through the cracks in the walls, stretching shadows like spilled ink across the floor. Outside, the sky bruises to deep blue, then black. You can feel the cold returnin' slinking its way in through every gap and seam. So the ritual begins. It's almost bedtime. Not that you're particularly tired, it's just that the dark doesn't give you much choice. Candles are a luxury. Oil lamps, forget it. You have the fire, that's it. And the fire must survive the night. Everyone shifts around the hearth, gathering close for the final warmth. You've eaten, if you can call it that. A ladle of broth, a lump of bread, maybe a sliver of pork fat if it was a lucky week. Your belly isn't full, but it's not empty either. And that's what matters. Your mother is already preparing the fire bank. This is the moment when science meets superstition meets sleepy desperation. She takes the poker and gently spreads the glowing embers into a low mound. Not too flat, you don't want to smother them, but not too high either. A peaked ember bed can break apart and die before dawn. Then comes the ash, a slow, steady layering. She sprinkles it over the embers like a chef seasoning a roast, careful not to extinguish the faint red glow beneath. You watch the color dim, but not disappear. That's the trick. It's called firebanking, and it's your best shot at waking up to warmth tomorrow. Quirky medieval tidbit. For you, some families name their hearths, like a pet or a grandparent. Because when you depend on something to keep you alive every single night, it sort of becomes family. Your cousin once swore she heard hers purr. Once the ash is down, someone whispers a short rhyme, not a prayer exactly, but close. A charm, something old and mumbled that might have once meant something. Sleep deep, flame keep. Ash to stay, fire to rise. No one remembers who started it, but no one skips it either. Your job is to guard the tongs and the flint. They're laid beside the hearth within easy reach. If the fire dies anyway, someone will have to relight it in the morning. And that someone might be you. It's not glamorous. It's not heroic. But if you don't do it, the whole house suffers. And believe me, relighting a fire at dawn, with frozen fingers and numb lips, is a special kind of misery. Flint doesn't always spark. Bark doesn't always catch. Sometimes you crouch there for what feels like hours, coaxing a single coal into life, while your family huddles in silence behind you, waiting. So you really, really hope the embers make it. The fire now lies quiet, just a faint pulsing red under its ash blanket. It looks dead, but you know better. That's the ember's secret survival in stillness. People start to curl up again. One child lays their head on another shoulder. Someone tucks their feet beneath an older cousin. The baby is swaddled and rocked until its cries taper into soft whimpers. The space by the hearth becomes crowded limbs, overlapping breath, mingling in the smoky dark. Your body aches from the day, but not enough to distract from the chill creeping in. You lie down on your straw nest and pull your cloak up over your head. It smells like ash and old sweat. You don't care. It's warm enough for now. You can still see the faintest glow from beneath the ash, like a star buried in the ground. You stare at it as your eyelids get heavy, not because it's beautiful, though it kind of is, but because you need it. That glow is your anchor, your nightlight, your fire-shaped promise. Historians still debate whether firebanking was a nightly ritual or more of an occasional technique. Some evidence suggests it was as common as brushing your teeth well, if people in your time brushed their teeth nightly, which honestly they didn't. The house creaks as it cools. The wind picks up outside, whining through the moss-stuffed gaps. You hear something scratch at the door. Maybe a dog, maybe just the wind with claws. Either way, the fire bank remains still, and you sleep not deeply, but with a quiet kind of hope, because the ember is alive. Because maybe, just maybe, it'll still be there when the world returns to gray. You're not alone in this house. You never are. That's not just a sentiment, it's a spatial fact. Every inch of the floor, every fold of the blankets, every breath of relatively warmer air is already claimed. You sleep together because you have to, not just for comfort, for survival. The fire may be the heart, but the bodies are the insulation. You shift in your corner of the communal sprawl, careful not to jab anyone with your elbow. There's a child's foot in your rib cage. Someone's damp hair tickles your cheek. Your brother's breath drifts steadily against the back of your neck. It smells like turnips. Again, this is the warmest part of the house, not because it's actually warm, but because it contains all the heat your little family can generate. A pile of humans, tangled together like laundry faces, pressed into cloaks and corners, just trying to outlast the night. There's no such thing as personal space. Forget it. Privacy, luxury. You're all mashed together like layers in a lasagna, soft in the middle, crusty at the edges, and definitely a bit funky. You pull your knees to your chest, your cloak tight around your face. Someone mumbles in their sleep. Someone else lets out a truly impressive snore, the kind that rattles in the nose before it bursts through the lips. You try to ignore it. The smell is something else entirely. It's not offensive so much as inevitable. Unwashed feet, old wool, wood smoke, a faint hint of pig, a stronger hint of garlic, the human bouquet. At some point, your brain just filters it out, like how you stop hearing the ticking of a clock, or the groaning of your own hunger. A rat scurries in the rafters above. You hear it pause, listening. You pretend it's not there. Underneath the layers of bodies, the ground is still cold. The straw helps, but not much. Everyone's cloaks and tunics and damp rags have been layered and relayered until they're almost stitched together by proximity. You shift a bit more, trying to find a patch that's still warm. There isn't one. There's a child, your cousin, maybe pressed against your side, fast asleep. Her nose is red, but she's breathing steadily. She's too young to complain about the cold, but old enough to snore like a champion. You're proud of her. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some families used to tell stories about bed spirits who'd come nibble your ears if you slept alone. Was it superstition or just a clever way to make kids snuggle closer for warmth? Either way, no one here is risking solo sleep. Historians still argue whether these communal sleeping arrangements were mostly for peasants or more widely practiced across classes. In winter, even nobles might gather in a single room with their retainers, not out of affection, but necessity. When the world freezes over, you stop caring about class boundaries. You just want warm feet. Your mother shifts beside you and tucks her arm around your youngest sibling. Her hand is cracked from washing her nails lined with soot, but her touch is steady, protective. That arm has broken up, fights, stirred cauldrons, pulled weeds, and now it's a blanket. Your father lies across from you, a thick log of a man who somehow managed to sleep through the baby's occasional fussing and your brother's sleep-talking. His snores come in bursts like a blacksmith's bellows. You've timed them before when bored. You can't help but think, if anyone rolled over too hard, we'd all collapse like dominoes. You smile to yourself, just a little. But underneath the grumbles and the kicks and the elbow-in-face moments, there's a strange kind of peace. You're together. No one is alone in the cold. And that's a kind of power. You lie there, cheek pressed to someone's shoulder, trying not to think too hard about whose, and listen to the breathing. Slow, rhythmic. A lullaby made of lungs. Outside, the wind howls. The rafters creak. The fire pit glows faintly under its ash blanket. And inside this tangle of limbs and rags and hearts still beating, you find your warmth. You're not just surviving the cold, you're surviving it together. You wake to something wet touching your foot. Not the drip drip of the roof that you're used to. This is warmer, slimier, and it snorts. You open one bleary eye and find yourself staring into the wide, judgmental gaze of a cow. Her nose hovers inches from your toes, steaming softly in the morning chill. She blinks, once shifts her weight, and sighs deeply. Ah, yes, the livestock. They're not outside. Not in winter. That would be madness. These are your special overnight guests, chickens, pigs, the aforementioned cow, all brought inside at night to protect them from the cold and more practically from being stolen or eaten by something larger with sharper teeth. You roll over slightly and spot a chicken perched on a rafter. It blinks at you. You blink back. The truce is mutual but fragile. A pig snores softly near the door, curled up like a bizarre snorting pillow. One of the kids is actually using it as a footrest. That's effective if questionable. The pig doesn't seem to mind. The room smells even more alive than usual this morning. Manure, wet feathers. A general barnyard bouquet wafts through the smoky air like incense. You don't flinch anymore. It's just another scent in the ever-expanding aroma profile of your life. The animals add heat. That's the key. They're smelly, noisy, and prone to the occasional accident in corners you'd rather keep clean. But their body warmth helps raise the temperature just enough to matter. You can feel it too. a subtle difference. The cold hasn't gnawed into your bones quite as deeply this morning. Thank the pigs. Historians still argue whether peasants always brought animals into the home during winter or only did so in dire conditions. But archaeological finds and contemporary writings suggest it was common in many places, where the walls are thin and the nights are long. You take your warmth where you can get it, even if it moves. You push yourself up to sitting. The straw shifts beneath you with a faint crackle. One of the chickens flutters down from the beam and lands squarely on someone's stomach. They grunt, but don't wake. A sleepy hand flops over the bird's back like an absent-minded hug. It's chaos, but it's organized chaos. The animals know their spots more or less. The cow stays near the wall, the pigs stick to the back half, and the chickens, well, they go wherever they please. Pecking, fluttering, occasionally pooping. You've learned to dodge creatively. You grab a bucket and head outside to dump the night's waste. The door sticks from the frost, but you yank it open and brace against the morning air. It hits your face like a slap made of ice. You gasp without meaning to then step out. The ground crunches under your boots, frozen mud. You dump the bucket in the compost pile, then quickly duck back inside, slamming the door shut behind you. You feel the air warm by a single degree as it closes. Back inside, someone is milking the cow, right there in the corner. She shifts her weight, sways her tail, and drops something wet onto the straw. You pretend not to notice. The milk hits the pail with a soft rhythmic splash. It smells fresh, animal warm. Your breakfast today might be a crust of bread dipped in that warm milk if you're lucky. Maybe a scrap of leftover stew. You pray the chicken didn't get to it first. Here's a fun and mildly horrifying tidbit. There are records of pigs being kept under the family bed in some parts of medieval Europe. Not beside, not near, under. For warmth, for safety, for the sheer absurdity of it. Try not to picture it. Too late, sorry. Your cousin tries to shoo a chicken off the table with a piece of cloth. The chicken glares, flaps, and immediately jumps back once the cloth is down. It's won. It always wins. You eat somewhere else. Living with animals isn't just a matter of logistics, it's a constant negotiation. They're loud at the wrong times. They step on your face. They nibble your belongings. But they also keep you alive. Their heat, their milk, their eggs, their eventual meat, it's all vital. And besides, you've grown attached. The cow has a name, so does the pig. So does the mean chicken who pecks at your feet. You try not to name the ones you know won't be around by spring. That's a whole different kind of cold. So you wrap your cloak tighter, grab a piece of bread, and sit beside a snoring pig and a slowly waking chicken. The fire crackles. The room stinks. But the cold isn't winning today. And for now, that's enough. You don't get dressed in the morning. You stay dressed from yesterday and the day before that. And probably the week before that too. Because in this world, fashion has surrendered entirely to function. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just trying not to freeze to death. You rise stiffly from your straw nest, shake out your limbs, and begin the day's sacred ritual, the layering. First, you tug at the under tunic. Its wool scratchy but warm. Slightly damp at the cuffs, which is par for the course. Over that goes another tunic thicker and darker with age. The collar's stretched one elbow has a patch, and the hem drags a bit, but it's yours. You belt it with a bit of rope, because buttons are for rich people and zippers haven't been invented yet. Next, the wool cloak. It smells like sheep and smoke and your own anxiety, but it's heavy, and heavy means warm. You drape it around your shoulders like a knight preparing for battle. And in a way you are, against the elements. Scarves. Rags, really. You wrap one around your neck, another around your ears. A third, slightly crusty one gets tied over your hair like a cap. You look like a badly bundled turnip, but you're warmer, slightly. Your boots, if you're lucky enough to have them, go on last. Made from stitched hide, cracked and resewn, at least 5 times, lined with straw. You stomp your feet to shift the frozen floor grit and wonder vaguely whether both socks match. They don't, but they exist, and that's the real flex. And just like that, you're dressed. And you're still cold, but now you're less cold, which is basically a win. Around you, the rest of the house begins its slow-motion dressing ballet. Everyone layering everything they own. Your little cousin walks past looking like a woolen snowman. 2 tunics, 3 scarves, and 1 too big cloak dragging behind her like a bridal train. Fashion Week, this is not. Here's your daily quirky tidbit. Some folks in the Middle Ages wore their clothes to bed and kept them on during the day to build up a layer of trapped body heat between fabric and skin. It wasn't just about adding layers, it was about never removing them. Historians still argue whether this strategy was effective or just made people miserable and damp. But considering the alternatives, like actual frostbite, it was probably the lesser evil. Your outer layers are stiff with old sweat and occasional rain. But weirdly, that kind of works. The dampness has frozen into a thin crust in places, forming a sort of medieval exoskeleton. You thump one sleeve, and a bit of frost cracks off like sugar from a donut. Delightful. You bend to tie your leg wraps, long strips of cloth wound tightly from ankle to knee. They keep out drafts, sort of. Mostly they keep the straw from riding up your legs. And yes, they itch. Everything itches, but that's a sign your limbs are still alive. You'll take it. Outside, someone calls. You pull your hood low and brace for the door. The wooden slab creaks as you push it open, and the wind slaps your face in greeting. It's not snowing today. That's the good news. The bad news is that the cold is so dry and sharp, it might as well be made of knives. You push forward anyway, boots crunching on the frozen ground. Your breath fogs the air. Your eyelashes stiffen, but your layers hold. Not well, not comfortably, but enough. You spot a neighbor across the field. He's wearing what might once have been a tunic, now patched into a sort of multicolored quilt of desperation. He waves. You wave back, fingers stiff in your rag gloves. And that's the thing, everyone looks ridiculous. Every person in the village is wearing their entire wardrobe like a walk-in closet. No one's judging. No one's impressed. They're just trying to get through the season without turning into a popsicle. Back inside someone's hanging wet cloaks, near the fire hoping the smoke will dry them out. Spoiler, it won't. They'll just smell like stew and smoldering regret. You sit down, adjust your hood, and let your arms rest. You're warm enough to think clearly again. You're not sweating. You're not frozen. You've reached the middle ground, functional discomfort. And in winter, that's what counts. At some point, maybe yesterday, maybe last week, you stopped noticing the grime. You can feel it, sure. The crust behind your ears, the stiffness in your collar, the rough grit around your wrists where water hasn't touched in days. But it's not alarming. It's armor. In fact, it's kind of the point. Because dirt, believe it or not, helps keep you warm. You didn't bathe this week. Or last week. Possibly not, since before the frost began. But here's the twist that's not neglect, it's strategy. Every layer of sweat, every splash of spilled broth, every fleck of wood ash and cow breath, it all sticks to you like an accidental thermal shield. It starts with body oil. You sweat under all those layers, but there's nowhere for it to go, so it mingles with dust, smoke, animal hair, flour, mud, whatever's in the air really, and forms a greasy, filmy, not entirely pleasant shell. And that shell traps warmth. Bare skin loses heat fast. Filthy skin, surprisingly less so. You've heard older folks say, "Don't scrub too clean in winter, you'll let the cold in." Sounds ridiculous. But when you once watched a boy get feverish after washing with ice-cold water in January, it started to make sense. So you accept the grime, your hair. You haven't combed it in days. It's matted under your scarf full of soot and probably a feather. Your hands are brown at the knuckles and not from tanning. The lines in your palms are packed with something you're too tired to name. Your fingernails don't ask. You lean back against the wall and feel the dirt press into your cheek. It's not comforting, but it is familiar. Like a second skin made of the world around you. Quirky fact, some medieval people believed washing weakened the body's natural defenses. One 14th century medical text even warned against bathing too often in winter, claiming it made your organs vulnerable to the air. In their defense, hot water was hard to come by, and standing around wet in sub-zero weather was a death sentence. Historians still argue how often people actually bathed. Some suggest it was more frequent than we think when possible. Others say winter hygiene was more about scraping and wiping than water and soap. Either way, you're not getting a bath anytime soon. Someone throws a handful of dried mint on the fire. The smoke sharpens, cuts through the animal stench, the unwashed bodies, the musty corners of the house. You breathe it in deeply. It burns a little, but it's almost nice. You run your hand down your cloak. There's a smear of something hardened into the fabric. Could be food, could be mud, could be a combination of both. You shrug. It's not important. Your little brother crawls past, face smeared with something unidentifiable, nose, crusted hands, blackened like he's been mining coal. He doesn't care. He's warm. He grins at you with all four of his teeth and tucks himself under a pile of rags, filthy, happy alive. Someone once said cleanliness is next to godliness, but they clearly didn't live through medieval winters. Here, dirt isn't sin, it's survival. You keep just clean enough not to get sick and just dirty enough not to freeze. You scratch your neck. Something shifts under your collar. You decide not to investigate. The fire crackles. The animals shuffle. The air is thick with the scent of people who've stopped worrying about how they smell. And you settle back down into your clothes, your grime, your nest of semi-warm, semi-damp comfort. You are insulated, and you are still here. You lie back down and hear the familiar crunch beneath you, the whisper of flattened straw shifting under your weight. This is your bed, such as it is. A pile of last season's hay compressed into a lumpy sack and absolutely alive with company. You try not to think about it, about them, because the straw it moves. Not all at once, not in an obvious way, but slowly. In little crawls and scuttles, things burrow in it, things lay eggs, things hatch. It's like sleeping on top of a time-lapse nature documentary, except you're the warm surface they're thriving under. You learned young not to flinch when you feel the tickle of legs on your back or the occasional sharp bite on your hip. It just means you're still warm enough to attract attention. You scratch discreetly, find nothing. Or rather, you know they're there, but nothing you can catch. You've already named one of them just to cope. A large, slow-moving flea you called Henry. You swore he had a family, maybe a career, probably a tiny straw mortgage. You turn over, pressing your face into the least scratchy bit of your sack. The straw pokes through the cloth like pine needles, some splintering into bits, sharp enough to pierce skin. You once spent a whole morning picking straw slivers out of your thigh. You didn't even bleed. The skin's that used to it. Still, it's better than sleeping directly on the ground. The straw holds warmth well some. It keeps the cold from leaching through your bones as fast. And it's dry. Mostly. Unless someone spilled stew on it last week, which, yeah, that tracks. You reach under your makeshift pillow, actually just a wad of rags, and tug at a piece of twine that's been digging into your shoulder. It comes away covered in hair. Not yours. Charming. Historians have uncovered all sorts of straw bedding methods, some stuffed in sacks, others piled loose in corners. But almost all of them, over time, became insect hotels. Changing the straw wasn't daily or weekly, it was seasonal. You know it's time for fresh straw when the current batch starts to move. Which is now, but you're not doing that today. Harvested straw isn't free, and what's left in the loft is probably being used for something more important, like animal feed fire starters or plugging roof holes. Besides, the old straw has kind of settled. It's familiar. Gross, yes, but comfortably gross. Like your own personal swamp. Your sibling kicks in their sleep, stirring the bed pile and releasing a puff of sweetish, musty air. A blend of hay, rot sweat, and goat. You cover your nose with your cloak and try to breathe through your mouth. Nope. That's worse. The scratching starts again. Lower back just above your belt. You reach behind you and thump the straw. The movement stops. For now. Here's a particularly odd tidbit. Some folks in the Middle Ages tried adding lavender or mint to their straw to ward off lice. The idea was that the smell would drive the bugs away. Did it work? Debatable. But your aunt did once try stuffing dried herbs into her bed and woke up sneezing for 3 days straight. The lice didn't seem to mind. Eventually, you drift back toward sleep. It's not restful. You twitch. You itch. You curl tighter to hold on to the fading warmth from your own body, the fire still glowing faintly under the ash. The room smells like humanity in all its earthy animal glory. The straw crackles beneath you like a fire made of discomfort. Something nibbles near your elbow. You ignore it, because this is your bed, and it's doing its job. You wake to a fresh draft, slicing across your neck like a ghost's icy finger. It wasn't there yesterday. It's new. And that means something in the wall has given out. You open your eyes. It's still dark, but not fully just early enough that the light sneaks through in dull streaks, illuminating the floating flecks of ash and dust. You follow the chill to its source. A thin crack has opened in the mud wall, right where 2 panels of dried cow dung and straw have split under the strain of last night's freeze. You groan. The crack is small but strategic, positioned perfectly to funnel the wind across your bedding like a malicious little air vent. You reach out, grab a scrap of cloth from the pile near the hearth, torn from someone's tunic a month ago, now retired from fashion and promoted to insulation, and jam it into the gap. It flaps. It's not enough. So you stand up, cloak dragging, and shuffle toward the patch pile. Every home has a sad corner, stocked with whatever can be stuffed into a hole. Moss scraps of leather hunks of hardened wool feathers, even a bit of hardened cheese rind once. You're not proud of that last one. You press a clump of moss into the crack, then reinforce it with the cloth. You pack it tight with your fingers until the wind stops hissing. Then you sigh. Crisis temporarily averted. This house is a constant patch job. You fix it the same way you'd mend a hole in your sock, except the sock is your entire living space, and the hole lets in an invisible force trying to kill you. The walls are a mixture of cob, mud straw, and yes dung. Supposedly insulating, but only when kept dry and intact. Winter doesn't allow for either. The ground freezes the walls, shrink and crack, and every day brings a new drafty surprise. Historians still debate just how weatherproof these peasant homes were. Some argue the construction was actually quite clever for the time earth insulated self-regulating. Others say the surviving examples are simply the best of a much colder, leakier bunch. You know what camp you'd vote for. The roof groans above you. A bit of thatch has slipped during the night. Not enough to collapse yet, but it's sagging, and the last snow left a wet line down the inside wall. You eye it warily. Later, you'll deal with it later. Someone else is already at work stuffing rags into the frame of the door. The leather hinges have stiffened from the cold, and the plank doesn't close flush anymore. So now it lets in slivers of wind and rats. You lost a heel of bread last week to something fast and furry. Your father mutters something about the roof, then climbs up on the bench to check the upper seam near the beam. It's leaking light and air. He reaches up, tears, a strip from his old undershirt and starts jamming it into the gap with his knife hilt. You want to ask if we're patching the house or dressing a wound, but you don't. Because in this house, it's the same thing. Here's your oddball fact. For today, some medieval families used old animal hides as emergency wall coverings. If you had an extra sheepskin, or more often a bit of salvaged leather, you'd nail it over the hole and call it a day. It worked, kind of, until it dried, cracked and flapped in the wind like a sad frozen flag. You walk the perimeter of the room, hand outstretched fingers feeling for new leaks. You find 3. One by the floor, one behind the stool, and one right above where your sister sleeps. No wonder she kept muttering in her sleep about being chased by cold fingers. You wedge a bit of raveled wool into the base crack stuff, more moss behind the stool, and then mercifully find an old patch of fur in the corner. You press it gently into the wall near your sister's head, sealing the draft. She stirs but doesn't wake. You look around the room at the patched corners, the sagging roof, the bundle of drying clothes plugging the hole behind the hearth, and you see it for what it really is. Not a ruin, a quilt. Not in fabric, but in spirit. This house isn't pretty. It's not strong. But it holds because you make it hold. Every time you plug a gap, every time you shove a cloth into a seam, you're not just fixing a wall. You're defying the cold. You're saying not today. You sit back down on your straw bed, tug your cloak tighter, and let your breath fog the air. The wind outside still howls, but in here the world is sealed shut. For now, the fire doesn't sleep. And because of that, neither can all of you. Someone has to watch it always. If the embers die, if the ash cools completely, you don't just lose the light. You lose the heat, the cooking, the smoke that keeps the fleas down. You lose your shield against winter's long clawed fingers. So you take turns, sleeping in shifts, like sentries on the edge of an invisible battlefield, guarding against a silent, creeping enemy. Tonight, it's your turn. You sit near the hearth, hunched in your cloak, watching the glow beneath the ash. It pulses faintly like a living thing that breathes very, very slowly. You poke it gently with a stick, not too hard, just enough to stir a bit of life. A few sparks leap up, tiny orange fairies, dancing in the gloom. They fizzle and fall. You add a pinch of kindling, a breath, another pinch. The flame winks, then holds. It's enough. The rest of the house sleeps, curled in corners, wrapped in cloth and in each other. Soft snores, the rustle of straw, someone muttering in a dream. The fire casts shadows that stretch across faces like hands. Your legs are numb from sitting cross-legged too long. You shift, stretch, wince as the warmth in your thighs gives way to pins and needles. But you don't complain. You volunteered. And now it's your watch. The hours crawl. There's no clock, just the slow arc of the fire and the creeping frost on the inside of the door. You guess it's somewhere around the middle of the night. The deep part. The quiet part. the part where everything feels like a dream held together with thread. Historians still argue whether medieval households truly organized fire watch schedules, or if it was more informal. Whoever woke first took the job. But oral traditions and a few surviving journals hint at this rotation being a real, even sacred ritual. The fire was that important. And it's not just the cold you're guarding against. A stray ember, a gust of wind, one bad pop from a damp log, and the whole house could catch. Fire is life, but fire is also death. And you sit in that balance trying to keep it friendly. Here's your offbeat fact. In some European villages, people kept hearth charms, bits of bone iron or herbs buried in the ash. They weren't for show. They were protective tokens, meant to keep the flame burning and the house from burning with it. You rub your eyes. The smoke stings. The warmth from the fire keeps your front side toasty, but your back is freezing. You shift again, rotate like meat on a spit. You chuckle quietly at the image. Suddenly a crack in the wood, loud, sharp. You jump heart hammering, just the log splitting. But for a second, you thought, no, it's fine. You exhale, pull your cloak tighter, maybe even whisper a few words to the fire, just in case. Eventually you hear a stir, a hand brushing straw, a grunt, someone's waking. Your brother, rubbing sleep from his eyes, squinting at you like you're a ghost. He stumbles over and takes your spot by the fire without a word. You nod. The shift has changed. You crawl back toward your bedding legs, stiff spine bent like an old man's. Your spot is still warm slightly, so you curl into it. Cloak over your head, fingers tucked under your chin. And finally you sleep, but not deeply, not fully. Because even in rest, your ears are tuned to the rhythm of the fire, the crackle, the hiss, the silence that shouldn't happen. You dream of light and warmth and waking to a house still breathing with heat. You wake with a start gasping and immediately regret it. The air is razor sharp, slicing into your throat, catching in your chest. It's like inhaling winter itself. You cough once, then clamp your mouth shut. Everyone around you stirs, just a little annoyed but still asleep. You lie still, eyes wide, throat-burning lungs protesting. Lesson number 1. In a medieval winter, you don't breathe too deeply. Every inhale is a negotiation. Breathe wrong and the cold stabs deep. Breathe too fast and your chest tightens until it feels like you're drowning in frost. So you learn to sip the air through your nose shallow and slow, as if each breath is precious and slightly poisoned. The cloak over your head has trapped a pocket of warmth, a humid little bubble where your breath has built up overnight. It smells like wool and regret, but it's better than the alternative. You leave it there, just lifting the edge for the smallest inhale. Around you, the house sleeps. But even in sleep, you hear it. The rhythmic sniffles, the shallow wheezing, the occasional whistle of congested noses. This is how you know who's still healthy, who's fighting something, and who might not last the week. Cold doesn't just chill, it invites illness. And in this world, illness doesn't knock. It barges in, sits on your chest, and refuses to leave. Your younger sister coughed all night 2 days ago. Now she's quiet. Too quiet. You glance over. Her chest rises slowly. You relax a little. One of your cousins didn't make it through last winter, just a fever, just a cough, and then not even a whisper of breath. So yes, you breathe carefully. Here's a haunting tidbit. Some medieval physicians believed that inhaling cold air could cause humors to freeze inside the body, leading to sudden death. Dramatic, yes, but not entirely wrong. Cold-induced pneumonia was, and still is, a killer. You sit up slowly, cloaked like a mushroom, and let your breath adjust to the larger air around you. It takes a minute. Your lungs stretch like old leather. You cough again, then stifle it with your sleeve. The fire's been tended. The smoke hangs low. Not as heavy as yesterday, but enough to make breathing a guessing game. Find the angle where the smoke's less thick and stay there. You shuffle toward the fire and squat low, letting the warmth meet your skin in patches. Your hands go out first, then your nose, then your lungs finally relax. You take your first deep breath of the day. It's not pleasant. It tastes like ash and smoke and goat, but it's warm enough not to hurt. Someone opens the door to step outside. The blast of air that rushes in is icy and immediate. It curls through the house like a serpent, seeking bare skin, exposed lips, careless lungs. You all flinch. Someone swears under their breath. The door closes again. Silence returns. You pull your scarf higher, covering your mouth. It dampens the sting, traps a little moisture. It smells like old stew and salt, but you don't care. It's your filter, your armor. Historians still argue whether people knew how dangerous winter air could be, or if the careful breathing was more instinct than knowledge. But when the cold could stop a child's breath and bury a fever deep in your chest, you didn't need a degree to understand survival. Breathing is supposed to be effortless. In this life, it's anything but. You manage it like a fire, gently, cautiously guarding each spark of warmth with every exhale. And you think of spring, of green, of air that doesn't hurt. But until then, you breathe carefully, because cold air kills loudly. And breath. Breath is the quiet way you win. You can't eat your way out of winter, but you can try. Hunger is a constant companion, but worse than that is the chill that comes when your belly is empty. The kind of cold that starts deep in your gut and spreads outward, curling into your fingers, stealing the heat from behind your eyes. That's why food matters. Not just for energy, but for warmth. And this morning you're lucky. There's stew left. It's more of a thin broth at this point, cloudy from yesterday's boil, dotted with bits of root vegetables. And if the gods are kind, maybe a string of meat. You scoop it out carefully, steaming it over the fire, watching it bubble in the cracked clay pot like a slow spell coming to life. The smell fills the house. Everyone stirs. Turnips. Definitely turnips. Maybe a wilted onion. Black bread sits in a hard lump beside the pot. You soak it in the broth so it doesn't break your teeth. Someone once chipped a molar on bread. Bread. You eat slowly, blowing on each spoonful, savoring the steam as much as the taste. It's not delicious, it's not Instagram worthy, but it's hot. It slides down your throat like melted courage and blooms in your stomach like a hearth you can carry. And suddenly you're warm again. Not all over, but inside. And that's enough to change your whole day. Here's your quirky fact. Medieval folks knew that food helped fight cold long before science caught up. Heavy meals, fatty cuts, warm drinks, they weren't just filling. They were strategic. Some even believed eating garlic or onions could heat the blood. You're pretty sure that's just code for, I don't want to share. Your younger brother reaches for your bowl. You give him half, reluctantly. But he's got less body weight than a chicken, and he needs the warmth more than you. Your mother scrapes the last of the pot into her own bowl. You see her leave a bit behind, then pass it to the oldest child. She always eats last. Sometimes not at all. You finish your bread now soft and soaked, and wipe your bowl clean with your finger. Waste nothing. The fire might die. The wind might rise. But for now, you've got calories in your blood, and that means heat in your veins. Historians still debate what diets looked like for peasants in hard winters, how much meat was realistic, how much grain was stored, how creative they got with ingredients. Let's just say turnip and acorn surprise was probably more common than anyone wants to admit. Someone finds a nub of pork fat, precious, greasy, glistening. It's split 5 ways. You suck on your piece like a winter lollipop, letting the fat coat your throat and fuel your furnace. It's not just meals, it's rhythm. You eat early before the cold has a chance to settle. You eat again if the fire wanes. You eat small things if you're working outside, just enough to keep your belly embers glowing. And drinking not water, it's too cold. You warm a tin cup of weak ale, or watered wine, maybe a broth if someone's generous. You sip slow. Let it coat your ribs, and for a few blessed minutes, the cold isn't clawing at your edges. Your hands thaw, your feet stop hurting. You smile. It's small but real. The house feels almost alive with it. A room full of people, exhaling steam and chewing rhythmically like cows around a shared trough. You'd laugh if your mouth weren't full. Later, you'll feel the hunger again. The cold will come back. But now your body is working, burning, turning scraps and broth into motion and fire. And in winter, that's everything. The fire is strong now, flickering alive, snapping little sparks into the smoke-heavy air. But you know it won't last. It never does. By nightfall, it'll be dimmed again, buried under ash and prayers. So now is the time to borrow a bit of its warmth. Steal it, store it. Carry it forward into the long cold ahead. You start with the stones, flat ones, rounded ones, any rock big enough to hold heat, but small enough to lift without screaming. You push them into the edge of the hearth with a stick, nudging them into the coals until they glow faintly red like embarrassed potatoes. Then you wait. They need to soak it in. Meanwhile, your sister is preparing the hay box. It's not a box, really, just a basket, lined with straw cloth and more straw, deep, soft, flammable. She tucks a bundle of blankets around the edges like she's swaddling a baby. The whole contraption smells like dry grass and effort. Once the rocks are ready, you lift one out with tongs and roll it in thick cloth carefully, because the last time someone rushed the smell of burned wool and a bit of skin lingered for days. You nestle the wrapped stone into the hay box. Instantly, a wave of warm air escapes like the soft breath of a sleeping dog. You close the lid more cloth and let it sit. In an hour, you'll pull it out and tuck it at someone's feet in bed. Not because it'll keep them toasty all night, but because it'll keep their toes from turning blue before midnight. Sometimes that's the win. Historians have written about hay boxes, mostly as slow cookers, ingenious peasant tech that let food stew without flame by retaining heat. But the same concept worked for warmth. Hot rocks, insulated right, could glow on long after the fire gave up. You prepare another stone, this one for the baby's cradle, smaller, wrapped in double layers, set at a safe distance. The cradle itself is suspended slightly off the ground, less draft that way, but the warmth is still fleeting. So the stone helps. Just a touch of lingering heat like a kiss on the foot. Your father prefers the foot rock method, sliding one under the blanket, at night pressed against his ankles. He claims it keeps the blood moving. Your mother says it just makes him smell like cooked socks. A few others use them like heaters during chores, placing one near the wash basin or resting a wrapped stone on their lap while mending clothes. It doesn't stay hot for long, but long enough to stop the shivering. Your quirky fact of the night: in some parts of Europe, people heated bricks in the fire and placed them in beds, wagons, even under cloaks during travel. It was a low-tech space heater. And yes, more than a few garments and eyebrows were singed in the process. You set one rock aside for yourself. Just a little one, palm-sized, still warm. You cradle it while you sit by the fire, your fingers slowly thawing. The rock hums faintly with the memory of flame. Later you'll take it to bed. Wrap it, tuck it near your belly or feet, and fall asleep with one less reason to shiver. And if it cools too quickly, well, there's always tomorrow's batch. You might not have hot water or insulation or electricity, but you have rocks and straw and the stubbornness to turn them into survival. It's dark now. Again. The fire is banked beneath a blanket of ash. The animals are snuffling quietly in their corners. Everyone is curled into their places, piled into the same huddle as every night, a tangled knot of limbs, blankets, and breath. And you nestled between two siblings and the rough, lumpy edge of your straw sack, close your eyes and do the only thing left to do. You pray, not for fortune, not for miracles, just to wake up in the morning. Faith is funny in a winter like this. It's not grand or poetic or chanted from a mountaintop. It's whispered through chattering teeth, muttered in half-sleep, scratched into the cold air between snores. It's survival wrapped in silence. You don't kneel. That would mean touching the frozen ground. You don't light a candle. That would mean wasting fire. You just whisper low and soft, hoping that something hears you. Sometimes it's the same prayer every night, a repetition, a rhythm, like breathing but quieter. Sometimes it changes. Tonight it's keep the fire, keep my fingers, keep the roof where it is. Your mother has her own words. She doesn't share them. But you see her lips move sometimes as she stares into the flames. Your father prays with his hands, fixing things, patching, checking. Every act a kind of ritual. Historians still argue how much medieval peasants practiced religion formally in their own homes. Church attendance was expected, yes, but in houses like yours, where every moment was spent surviving faith, was less performance and more practice. A habit, like patching walls or tending fires. Your house doesn't have a shrine, just a wooden cross over the door and a small cracked token of some saint no one can name anymore. Someone says it protects the house. Someone else says it just keeps the mice away. Either way, it stays. And then there are the stories, the ones passed around in winter long after chores are done, and there's nothing left to do but wait for sleep. Stories of saints who lit fires with their hands, of miracles where bread appeared in empty ovens, of holy men who could speak to wolves and convince them not to eat the livestock. You don't believe all of them, but some feel possible if only because you want them to be. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some regions, people used to leave a spoon of stew or a scrap of bread near the hearth overnight, not for themselves, not even for animals, but as an offering to house spirits or saints, or maybe just the universe itself. A token gesture, just in case. Your family did that once. A crust of bread left beside the coals. In the morning it was gone. The cat probably took it. But your grandmother smiled anyway and said, "See, we're not forgotten." You shift slightly in the straw. The warmth from your hot rock has faded, but the layer of sleeping bodies around you holds a pocket of heat, like a living cocoon. Your feet are still cold. Your nose is frozen, but the rest of you manageable. You say one last line in your head, "Just get me to light." That's all it takes, a single night, one more. And if the wind howls and the fire crackles too loud and the roof creaks ominously, well, that's normal. You've heard it all before. You've survived it all before. You drift not into full sleep, but into that warm gray halfway place where time slows, where the dark isn't scary, just present, where the fire breathes under its ash, and so do you. And somewhere in the haze of fatigue and cold, you feel a small flicker of something not quite heat, not quite hope. Just enough to keep going. You wake before the sun. Again, the fire banked under ash has survived. Barely. A faint orange glow peeks through the powdery gray. You can feel it before you see it, just a nudge of warmth against your cheek, like the fire saying, "Still here." You sit up slowly. Your joints crack. Your shoulders ache. Your feet tingle from the cold that crept in during the night. But you're upright, breathing, and not alone. Around you, the household stirs. Sleepy groans, sniffling noses, the stretch of tired limbs under too many layers. Your mother coughs once deep and hoarse, then starts to poke at the fire with a stick. Sparks jump like tiny dancers, and she adds a bit of bark. The flame answers. You've made it through another night. That's no small thing. In this world, in this house, in this winter, every single morning is a triumph. It means the cold didn't win. That hunger didn't win. That the fire, the body, the breath all healed. Their line just long enough for light to return. You rise and step outside for a moment. The air is cold, sharp, clean. Frost dusts the ground, turning everything into a field of silver. You see your footprints from yesterday, frozen into hard ridges, evidence that yes, you were here. You are still here. Inside, someone feeds the animals. The pig grunts. The cow exhales steam. The chicken flaps angrily off the table, where it's not supposed to be but always is. Life resumes. And somehow, in this cycle of ash and straw smoke and breath, there's strength. Not flashy strength, not heroic, just enduring. And that's its own kind of power. Here's your final quirky fact. In some folk traditions, people believed that those who endured the hardest winters without complaint were granted extra years of life, or at the very least, stronger children. Whether true or not, it reflects a truth you've lived every day. Endurance is legacy. Historians will argue forever whether life in the Middle Ages was nasty brutish and short, or just misunderstood. But you know, it wasn't just suffering. It was community. It was invention. It was survival stacked like firewood and passed from one generation to the next. Your hands are cracked. Your tunic is patched for the 5th time. Your house is made of sticks and frozen mud. But it stands because you keep it standing. You didn't have warmth. You made it. You didn't have comfort. You invented it. You didn't have ease. You endured. And that grit, that stubborn, muddy, frostbitten determination, that's what got you here. That's what you'll leave behind. So the next time someone looks back at the past and scoffs at how hard it must have been, remind them gently, if you can, that people didn't just survive those winters. They built the world from them. And the warmth you feel now in your stomach, in your chest, in the soft crackle of the fire beside you, that's the legacy. You're older now, your back is curved, your hands stiff, your teeth not so numerous, but you're still here, still rising with the sun, still kneading dough with aching wrists, still dragging firewood across a courtyard that's more mud than stone. You've outlasted blizzard's blight, and at least 3 harvests so bad they were named in songs no one likes to sing anymore. And you've done it all without maps, without manuals, and definitely without sympathy from the tax collector. Your life has been the textbook, its margins smudged with soot and hope. Every winter carved itself into your bones like a warning, and a whisper, be ready. You don't read weather patterns. You read the air. You know when snow is coming just by the way the crows move. You can predict famine from the thickness of the tree bark. And you can tell which neighbors will crack first in a crisis just by watching who hoards onions. There's no handbook for how to fix a frozen latch with bare hands, how to deliver a breech baby in a candlelit stable, or how to bury a friend when the ground's too hard to dig. You figured it out, or someone showed you, or someone failed to and you learned by watching the cost. Resilience wasn't a motto or a TikTok trend, it was the only choice. You mended what broke. You fed what was starving. You prayed with lips cracked by frost, not because it always worked, but because giving up wasn't on the table even when food wasn't. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasantry truly grasped the scale of their own hardship or whether familiarity numbed them to it. But from the inside, every frostbitten toe, every empty granary, every hard-earned loaf told its own story. You didn't have to know the macroeconomics, you just had to survive until spring. And yet beneath all that toughness, there's a softness you rarely show. The way you wrap a baby in 2 cloaks instead of 1. The way you leave the last turnip for your neighbor. The way you carry a dead lamb home without a word, but with tears frozen to your lashes. You've passed these lessons on. Not with speeches or scrolls, but with quiet habits and rough-skinned hands. A granddaughter learns to thatch because you didn't fix the roof for her, you let her climb. A son learns to ration because you didn't hide the hunger, you shared it. And when someone younger breaks down at the first sign of hardship, you don't scold, you just show them your scars and let them draw strength. The firewood pile out back isn't just warmth, it's memory. Each log was split during a storm or a grief or a moment when you didn't think you could swing the axe again. And you did anyway. A monk once told you that suffering builds character. You told him character doesn't keep your toes from falling off. He didn't laugh, but you did. Because sometimes resilience is knowing when to take the lesson and when to poke fun at it. Now, as the cold season settles in, one more time, you sit by the hearth, fingers curled around a steaming cup of broth. You don't expect comfort, but you've earned peace, just for tonight. Hey guys, tonight we climb into a pair of muddy boots, step into a smoky hut, and sit beside a medieval fire that's just barely winning against the wind. You're cold, you're hungry, and your socks, well, you don't have socks. But what you do have is something surprisingly powerful: laughter. Picture it. Outside, frost laces the hedges like silver chainmail. Your fingers are red and raw from chopping kindling, and the only thing standing between your family and frostbite is a fire made of damp twigs and stubborn optimism. But then someone sneezes so hard, they fall off their stool, and for a moment you all just break. Laughing so hard it echoes in the rafters like a choir of geese. You probably won't survive this century, but you will survive this night. And in that moment, that's enough. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grow up in a tiny village nestled between a marsh and a monastery. The roofs drip. The pigs roam freely and everyone shares the same 2 jokes about Father Osric's hairline. Humor is your inheritance passed down like spoons and scars. Your mother sings parody hymns while peeling onions. Your brother rewrites saints' names into ridiculous insults. You learn early if you can laugh, you're still alive. Work begins before dawn. You scrape frost from the milking pail and the cow breathes steam onto your face like some passive-aggressive dragon. The tasks are grueling and yet, someone always finds the funny. A chicken steals your lunch. A neighbor claims his goose is possessed. Even the parish priest cracks a grin when a sheep wanders into mass and refuses to leave. Historians still argue whether medieval humor was mostly body moralizing or accidental truth, it was probably all three, and necessary. Because when death dances in every shadow, laughter becomes the rebellion. A tiny act of defiance against the cold, the hunger, and the endless mud. Even the worst winter brings its jokes. You slip on ice and fall into a dung heap. A rat chews through your boot and leaves your toes cold and insulted. You joke that your stew's gotten so thin, it started gossiping with the wind. The fire crackles in approval. And on those nights, oh, those nights when everything seems too hard, when the cold presses close and the wind sings of loss, someone always remembers a story. The one about the boy who tried to marry a goose. The one where old Marwin swore he saw a ghost. But it turned out to be his wife with a blanket on her head. And just like that, the night is bearable again. The joke fades, but the warmth it left behind lingers, like the glow from embers small, steady and deeply human. You stretch out your feet toward the hearth, feel the rough stone beneath your soles, and listen to the wind scratch at the shutters like an old grudge. It's easy to forget sometimes how close you are to the edge. But then someone tosses another log on the fire, and the room flickers back into life. This right here is what survival looks like. Not grand gestures, not noble speeches, just shared heat, shared breath, shared silence. Someone offers you the crust of their bread, someone else pours a little extra broth into your cup. These are your people, and their kindness is quiet but relentless. You remember the first time you saw someone give up their only cloak for an elder. They said nothing. They just wrapped it around her shoulders, shivered a little, and went back to work. No angels descended, no miracles. Happened just that one small gesture burning brighter than any torch. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant communities were truly as tight-knit and altruistic as the records suggest. But you know what you saw. You know what it felt like to be seen even in the dark. And here's the wild part: that fire never died. That instinct to give instead of hoard, to comfort instead of compete, it didn't get buried with the past. It passed on ember to ember. You see it today when a neighbor checks in during a blackout, when someone brings soup to a sick friend, when a stranger stops to help with a flat tire in the rain. Because the fire that kept you alive wasn't just in the hearth. It was in the way you carried water for someone else's mother, in the way you taught a child to patch shoes, in the stories you told when food ran out just to keep everyone from panicking. Survival was a group project and no one got to graduate early. One quirky old tale you heard from a traveling peddler claimed that some villages kept an actual kindness log by the fire, a chunk of old wood that people would tap when they received help, as if logging good deeds with the spirits. True or not, The idea stuck. It made sense. You didn't write history with ink. You wrote it with warmth. And that warmth was contagious. Even when famine came knocking and plague danced through your parish, people still found ways to care. Someone always dug the graves. Someone always sang the songs. Someone always kept the children close so they wouldn't see too much. No matter how bad things got, the fire never went out. Tonight you see it again, not in a grand hall or a knight's banner, but in a pair of mittens handed off to someone younger, in a bowl of stew scraped clean and left at a neighbor's door, in a half-finished lullaby hummed by someone who's lost too much but still finds the breath to soothe. You're part of that chain now, not just surviving, but keeping others warm with your presence, your patience, your very breath. You lean back listening to the coals shift and sigh, and you realize even in a world this cold, you've built something that lasts, something no frost can kill. You step outside, and your breath instantly becomes fog. Not fog like a moody movie scene. This stuff could freeze midair and fall to the ground like tiny clouds. Your boots stitched from old leather, and hopes sink into packed snow. Every step squeaks. Children scurry around their cheeks, pinched pink by wind that bites harder than a spiteful cousin. Still they grin. A group near the well is playing something like tag only with more tripping and a lot more yelling. No electronics, no store-bought toys, just stones kicked into chalk-drawn goals, and maybe a rag ball someone stitched from sheep's wool and stubbornness. You join in, instantly slipping. It's fine. Nobody's keeping score. Winning isn't the point. Moving is. Some kids chase after a goat who definitely didn't ask to play. Others are crouched over patches of frozen mud, carving little dolls and animals from twigs, bark, and the occasional stolen cloth scrap. You see a tiny sled made from an old drawer. One kid, eyes watering from the cold, pushes his friend down a hill. It tips immediately. Everyone cheers. Lunch. Maybe a piece of dark bread shared in bites. You get a turn if you can tell a joke, preferably one the elders haven't heard 100 times. Someone mimics the village priest's snore. A hit. Around a corner, a girl is painting stones with leftover dye from someone's weaving project. Blue sun's green dogs, a suspiciously modern-looking smiley face. She lines them up along the frozen path like a parade of secret guardians. Historians still argue whether such personal crafts were considered art or just something to keep the hands warm and the brain quiet. Of course, the grown-ups are unimpressed. You overhear muttering useless games. That boy should be splitting kindling. But the moment they turn away, one of the elders chuckles. He's carving something to a horse, maybe, or a badly deformed chicken. You're not sure, and neither is he. At the communal fire pit, someone's building a fortress out of logs and snow. It's clearly not to scale. It's the king's castle, the boy declares. And I'm the king. Another kid immediately knocks it over. Long live the new king. Cue fake sword fight with sticks. And heroic falls into drifts of snow. One brave soul tries to reenact a battle scene from the last storytelling night, complete with dramatic dying. He earns a snowball to the face, curtain down. A little further out, a girl is ice skating without skates. just sliding on her feet across the frozen pond arms, flapping for balance. You try, you fall. She laughs and helps you up. Better luck next time, my lord. She curtsies, using a voice she must have picked up from mimicking traders. She's the merchant's daughter, and her confidence smells faintly of cinnamon. Nobody here owns much. Most toys are passed down or improvised. Yet the creativity is relentless. That slingshot made from the waistband of someone's old trousers and a forked branch. That drum, a cracked bowl, flipped over thumped with wooden spoons. Even joy has to be handcrafted. In the corner of the square, a new game begins. It's something between charades and musical chairs, with rules that change mid-play. You're not sure who's winning, but someone's grandmother is laughing so hard she has to sit down. A snowstorm starts soft at first, just flurries. Still someone yells storm battle and it's on. Snowballs fly. Cloaks are tugged. Screams of mock betrayal echo off stone walls. It lasts until fingers go numb and someone calls for broth. Inside, around the fire, the mood shifts. Kids sit in laps, wrapped in blankets that smell like wool and smoke. One boy pulls out a carved top. It spins unevenly, but everyone watches anyway. You think about how these moments are tucked between chores and chores, hauling wood, scrubbing floors, chasing chickens, but still, they happen. They matter. One woman threading a needle hums softly. A lullaby you don't recognize. You hum along anyway. Another child takes out a tiny flute, one of those strange fringe finds, made from a bird's bone. The sound is thin and squeaky, somehow perfect. Someone scrawled a game board in the soot on a flat stone. Two boys take turns moving pebble pieces. The winner crows, the loser shrugs. Next time he says, you realize something odd, despite the cold, the hunger, the thousand reasons not to smile. People do. They laugh. They create. Not because they don't know how hard life is, but because they know and play anyway. The sun barely lifts above the horizon now. It smears the sky in gray and orange for a few reluctant hours, then sinks again, like it changed its mind. You wake before dawn, not because you're rested, but because the village is already awake and loud in its own quiet way. There are no radios, no phones, not even a creaky phonograph. But sound is everywhere. It's in the crackle of a fire being coaxed to life sticks, snapping coals, shifting a whisper of breath through cupped hands. You lie there under layers of wool and patched linen eyes closed, just listening. From outside, you hear boots crunching on frost. A door creaking open with a groan that sounds almost human. And then your favorite, a string of muttered curses as someone steps in something unfortunate in the pig pen. Morning music. The communal ladle clinks against a clay bowl. That sound will follow you all day in kitchens by fires, at the long wooden tables where everyone eats and argues. Every clink says eat quickly and don't break the bowl. It's the only one we've got. In one house, a woman hums while grinding dried grain. Not a song you know. It slides in and out of tune like she's pulling it from memory note by note. In another corner, an old man coughs a long, scraping sound that seems to echo off every wall. You're pretty sure he's been coughing since the last harvest festival. You step outside, wrapped tight against the cold. A breeze rattles a wooden shutter. A dog barks. A goat answers for reasons known only to goats. Somewhere to your left, someone drops a metal pot. No swearing, just a resigned sigh. Later in the square, children sing. Not for fun necessarily, but to keep rhythm, while hauling a heavy bucket between them. The tune is old. You only catch a few words, something about snow and soup and someone named Lida, but the melody sticks to your ribs like good stew. Historians still argue whether these work songs were improvised daily or handed down unchanged from ancestors you wouldn't recognize. Inside, again, babies cry, not loudly, just enough to be known. Their mothers sway while cooking or mending. The lullabies they murmur are soft, worn smooth from repetition. You can't catch the lyrics, but the tone says, "Everything hush, little one. We're still here." You hear the squelch of wet boots by the door, the sharp pop of wood resettling in the fire, and the low murmur of voices debating whether the goat is pregnant or just unusually smug. These aren't the sounds of peace exactly, but they are the sounds of surviving. A boy passes by outside, dragging a sled behind him. It squeals over the packed snow like a violin being strangled. He hums as he goes. No particular tune, just the sort of hum you do when the world is cold, but you still have somewhere to be. Behind the bakery, someone's chopping wood. The axe lands with a deep, satisfying thunk, followed by a quick curse when the blade glances off a knot. A girl repeats the rhythm with her hands on a barrel she's drumming almost unconsciously. Even chores make music if you listen right. The healer's hut is quieter. Inside, a woman grinds herbs with a pestle and speaks to herself in a tone halfway between prayer and instructions. You hear the scrape of stone against stone, the rattle of bone dice being thrown for a diagnosis, and the faint rustle of dried leaves being bundled. A chicken clucks in protest from somewhere near the ceiling. Nobody's really sure why it's up there. You sit near the fire as night comes back too soon. Voices blur into one another, low and warm or sharp and teasing. Someone's telling a story. It's about a man who married a snow witch and had to boil garlic in his boots to break the spell. Probably made up, but everyone leans in anyway. The storyteller thumps his cup for effect, and then bam. She turns into a crow and flies away, screeching like this. He lets out a sound so strange, even the dog whines. You laugh, not because it's a good impression, but because everyone else is laughing too, and it's contagious. A young girl starts singing. Quiet at first. Her voice trembles on the high notes. Then another voice joins, then a third. No instruments, just harmony in a language nobody writes down anymore. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. You don't need to know the words. You already know what they mean. At some point, someone falls asleep mid-conversation. A booted foot twitches near the fire. A snore rises, is answered by another like dueling frogs. A kettle whistles unattended. You pull your blanket tighter and listen. The village may not have bells or horns, but you know the hour by its sounds. The high-pitched giggle of a sleep-deprived cousin. The hush of snow settling on the roof, the creak of timber beams cooling, the final cough of that old man down the lane, still going, and maybe the quietest sound of all your own breath, soft and steady, blending with the hum of everything around you. Now the cold slips into something quieter. It hasn't gone, not really, but it's waiting outside. Behind sealed cracks, behind the thickened door, behind the edge of sleep, inside the fire glows soft and steady. Not bright, but sure, like your breath, like your heartbeat, like the slow, grounded rhythm of a life lived close to the earth. Everyone's gone still again. You're lying back in your straw, nestled between warmth and weight. The smells of smoke wool old stew fade into the background, just familiar enough to feel like home. The house creaks, the wind hums, and you let your eyes drift shut one last time tonight, because you've done enough. You've patched the cracks, you've banked the fire, you've fed the animals, you've fed yourself, you've survived. The dark outside doesn't scare you anymore. It's just the other side of light. So breathe softly now. No need to sip the air. You're warm. You're wrapped in layers of love and dirt and rags and resilience. You're held. Let your thoughts slow. Let your limbs grow heavy. And let yourself fall. The fire is still there. So are you.